The rain came down in sheets that afternoon in Jamestown, California, and Beatrice Crawford had nothing but her worn leather boots to catch it in. She stood in the middle of what had once been her family's claim, watching the precious water drum against the parched earth, and tilted her head back to let the drops hit her face before she bent down and pulled off first one boot, then the other, setting them carefully on the flattest rock she could find to gather what little she could. The year was 1878, and the drought had been merciless for 3 long months, making every drop of water worth more than gold dust in these Sierra Nevada foothills. Isaac Abrams reined in his horse on the ridge above the abandoned claim and watched the young woman below with a mixture of curiosity and something that pulled at his chest. He had been riding through checking on his cattle when the clouds had finally broken, and now here was this slip of a woman in a faded calico dress, her long brown hair coming loose from its pins, standing barefoot in the mud with her boots positioned like tiny vessels to catch the rain. It was the saddest and most determined thing he had ever seen, and before he could think better of it, he was guiding his horse down the slope toward her. Beatrice heard the horse before she saw it, and her hand went instinctively to the pocket of her dress, where she kept her father's old folding knife. A woman alone on a claim was vulnerable, and she had learned to be wary since her father had died 2 months past from the fever that swept through the mining camps. When she looked up and saw the tall cowboy on the chestnut mare, his hat pulled low against the rain, she straightened her spine and tried to look more formidable than a 20-year-old woman standing barefoot in the mud could possibly look. "Afternoon, miss," Isaac called out, pulling his horse to a stop a respectful distance away. He was 24, with dark hair that curled at his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer. "That is some creative thinking with those boots." "It is all I have," Beatrice said, her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered. She had seen this man in town before, knew he ran cattle on the land east of the old Miller Ranch, but they had never spoken. "If you have come to tell me to move on, you should know I have legal claim to this land. My father filed properly." Isaac shook his head, dismounting slowly so as not to spook her. "I am not here for that. I was just riding through when I saw you. How long have you been out here alone?" "That is not your concern." Beatrice crossed her arms over her chest, aware suddenly of how she must look, soaked through and covered in mud. The rain was already slowing, the brief storm passing as quickly as it had come, and she glanced at her boots, which held perhaps a cup of water each. It would not be enough to last more than a day, even drinking sparingly. "Maybe not," Isaac agreed, "but I have a barrel at my place, a good oak one that my father brought around the Horn, and some spare lumber that could make a decent roof over your head." He gestured to the collapsed remains of the cabin behind her, which had caved in during a windstorm the week before. No person should have to live like this. Beatrice stared at him, searching his face for the angle, for what he would want in return. Men did not help women for nothing, not out here where survival was hard enough without charity. "What is the price?" "No price." Isaac met her eyes directly. "Just being neighborly. These are hard times, and your father was a decent man. He helped pull my horse out of a ravine last spring. I owe him a debt." Something in Beatrice's chest loosened slightly at the mention of her father. She remembered him coming home that day, muddy and exhausted but satisfied, saying he had helped a young rancher with a fine mare. "I remember that," she said quietly. "He talked about you. Said you had good hands with animals and a good head on your shoulders." Isaac felt warmth spread through him despite the cooling rain. "He said that, he did." Beatrice looked at her boots again, at the pathetic amount of water they held, and made a decision. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "I would be grateful for the barrel and the roof, But I will work to repay you. I can mend tack or cook or whatever needs doing." "We can work something out," Isaac said, though he had no intention of asking her for anything. He could see the exhaustion in the lines of her face, the way her dress hung loose on a frame that had clearly missed too many meals. "Let me ride back and get my wagon. I will bring the barrel today, and tomorrow I will come back with the lumber and we can start on the roof. You would do that?" Beatrice's voice cracked slightly, and she blinked hard against the sudden sting of tears. She had been so alone since her father died, so desperate and afraid, and this stranger was offering her what felt like salvation. "I would." Isaac climbed back on his horse, looking down at her with something soft in his expression. "You should not have to collect rain in your boots, miss. Nobody should." He rode off before she could say anything else, and Beatrice stood there in the mud watching him go, her heart doing something strange and fluttery in her chest. She poured the water from her boots into the old tin cup she kept, and it was barely enough to wet her throat, but it felt like more because of what it represented. For the first time since her father had died, she felt something that might have been hope. Isaac returned 3 hours later with a sturdy oak barrel strapped to his wagon and a canvas tarp that could serve as temporary shelter. Beatrice had changed into her only other dress, a dark blue cotton that was patched but clean, and had tried to do something with her hair. She stood near the ruins of the cabin, watching as he maneuvered the wagon down the rutted track that served as a road. "That is a fine barrel," she called out as he pulled the horses to a stop. "It is," Isaac agreed, jumping down from the seat. "My father was particular about his barrels. This one has held everything from salt pork to apple cider." He moved to the back of the wagon and started working the ropes loose. "Where do you want it?" Beatrice pointed to a spot near what had been the cabin's foundation, where the overhang from the collapsed roof would offer some protection from the sun. "There would be good. I can position containers under the edge when it rains." Together they wrestled the barrel off the wagon, and Beatrice was surprised by Isaac's easy strength and the way he was careful not to let her take too much of the weight. Once it was positioned, he unfolded the canvas tarp and started looking for places to secure it. "I have been sleeping under the wagon," Beatrice admitted, "but the ground is hard and when the wind comes up, there is no shelter at all." Isaac's jaw tightened at the thought of her out here alone in the dark with nothing between her and the elements. "This tarp will be better than nothing. Tomorrow I will bring proper lumber, and we will build you something more substantial." He found 2 sturdy posts that were still standing from the old cabin and began rigging the tarp between them, creating a sloped shelter that would shed water and provide shade. Beatrice watched him work, noticing the competent way his hands moved, the concentration on his face. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, with a strong jaw and a nose that looked like it had been broken once and healed slightly crooked. There was something inherently trustworthy about him, something that made her want to believe his intentions were as pure as he claimed. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked finally, unable to help herself. Isaac paused in his work, a rope in his hands, and looked at her seriously. "Because it is the right thing to do, because my mother raised me to help people who need it, and because I cannot stand the thought of anyone having to live the way you have been living." He went back to his knots, pulling them tight. "Is that answer enough?" "Yes," Beatrice said quietly. "It is." They worked together for the next hour, securing the tarp and moving what few possessions Beatrice had under its protection. She owned so little now, just a bedroll, a few cooking implements, some clothes in a battered trunk, and a small wooden box that held her mother's wedding ring and her father's pocket watch. Everything else had been sold to pay for his burial and the supplies she needed to survive. When the shelter was finished, Isaac stepped back to survey their work. It is not much, but it will keep you dry. It is more than I had this morning, Beatrice said. I do not know how to thank you. No thanks needed. Isaac hesitated, then reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a cloth-wrapped bundle. I brought some cornbread and bacon. My housekeeper made extra, and it will just go to waste if someone does not eat it. Beatrice's stomach growled audibly at the mention of food, and she felt her face flush with embarrassment. She had been rationing her supplies so carefully, eating once a day if she was lucky, and her body betrayed how hungry she truly was. Please, Isaac said gently, holding out the bundle. It really will go to waste. She took it with trembling hands, and when she unwrapped the cloth and saw the generous portions inside, her eyes filled with tears. You are very kind. I am just a man trying to do right. Isaac climbed back up onto his wagon, gathering the reins. I will be back tomorrow with the lumber, probably mid-morning if that suits you. It suits me fine. Beatrice clutched the food to her chest. Isaac, that is your name, right? I heard someone call you that in town. Isaac Abrams, yes. He touched the brim of his hat. And you are Beatrice Crawford. Just Beatrice is fine. She managed a small smile. Thank you, Isaac, truly. He nodded and guided the wagon back up the track, and Beatrice watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Then she sat down under her new shelter, unwrapped the food, and ate slowly, savoring every bite. The cornbread was sweet and golden, the bacon salty and rich, and it was the best meal she had eaten in weeks. As she chewed, she thought about the cowboy with the kind eyes and the generous heart, and something warm unfurled in her chest. That night, Beatrice slept better than she had since her father died. The tarp kept the dew off her bedroll, and her stomach was full for the first time in memory. She dreamed of rain filling the barrel, of a solid roof over her head, and of creek water eyes looking at her with something that might have been tenderness. Isaac arrived the next morning just as the sun was burning off the mist that clung to the hills. He brought a wagon loaded with lumber, nails, and tools, and a determination to build Beatrice a proper shelter before the day was done. He had hardly slept himself, his mind full of the young woman standing barefoot in the mud, and the realization that he wanted to see her again had come to him sometime in the dark hours before dawn. Beatrice heard the wagon and emerged from under the tarp, her hair braided neatly down her back and her face scrubbed clean. She had used some of the precious water from the barrel to wash, wanting to look presentable, though she told herself it was just a matter of pride and not because she cared what Isaac thought of her. "Good morning," she called out, shading her eyes against the sun. "Morning." Isaac set the brake and jumped down, moving to the back of the wagon. "I brought enough lumber to build a decent lean-to against what is left of your cabin wall. It will not be fancy, but it will be solid and dry." "That sounds perfect." Beatrice came closer, looking at the neat stacks of boards. "You must let me help. I know my way around a hammer." "Your father taught you." Isaac started unloading the lumber, handing boards to Beatrice, who stacked them nearby. "He did. He said a woman in the West needed to know how to take care of herself." Her voice went soft with memory. "He taught me a lot of things before he died." "I am sorry for your loss," Isaac said, and meant it. "The fever took a lot of good people." "It did." Beatrice brushed her hands on her skirt. "But we are still here, so I suppose we have to make the best of it." They worked through the morning, measuring and cutting and hammering boards into place. Isaac had brought a good design in his mind, a simple structure that would attach to the remaining wall of the old cabin and provide a weatherproof room about 12 feet square. It was more than Beatrice had dared hope for, and she found herself working beside him with a growing sense of gratitude and something else she was afraid to name. "You are good at this," Isaac commented as Beatrice lined up a board perfectly and drove a nail home with 3 clean strikes. Better than half the men I have worked with. My father was patient, Beatrice said, and I was a good student. I wanted to make him proud. I am sure you did. Isaac held the next board in place while she nailed it. What did he mine for? Gold, at first, but the gold played out years ago. Lately he was working a silver claim, but it was not producing much, enough to get by, but barely. She straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead. I tried to work it after he died, but I do not have the strength to move the heavy equipment, and I could not afford to hire help. What will you do? Isaac asked quietly. I do not know yet. Beatrice looked out over the land at the scrubby hills and the distant mountains. I could try to sell the claim, but nobody is buying these days. Or I could find work in town, but there is not much available for a woman alone. She glanced at him. I will figure something out, I always do. Isaac admired her determination, the way she refused to give up even when everything seemed stacked against her. You could work for me, he heard himself say. I need someone to help with the cooking and the household accounts. My housekeeper is getting on in years and the work is too much for her alone. Beatrice turned to look at him fully, searching his face. You are just being kind again. I am being practical, Isaac countered. Mrs. Henderson really does need help and you need work. It makes sense. He held her gaze. The pay would be fair, and there is a small room off the kitchen that you could have. You would not have to stay out here alone anymore. It was tempting, so tempting that Beatrice felt her resolve wavering. But there was something about accepting that felt like giving up on her independence, on the life her father had built for them. Let me think about it, she said finally. It is a generous offer, but I need to consider what is right. Of course. Isaac went back to work, trying not to feel disappointed. He understood pride, understood the need to stand on your own feet, but he wished she would let him help her more. They continued building through the afternoon, stopping only briefly to eat the lunch Isaac had brought, cold chicken and biscuits that Beatrice devoured with barely concealed hunger. By the time the sun was lowering toward the western hills, they had the basic structure complete. 4 walls, a slanted roof covered with overlapping boards that would shed water, a proper door that closed and latched, and a small window that could be shuttered against the wind. It was simple but solid, and when Beatrice stepped inside and looked around at the clean, swept space, she felt tears prick her eyes. It is wonderful, she whispered. I do not know what I did to deserve this. You did not have to do anything, Isaac said from the doorway. Sometimes people just need help, and if I can give it, I will. He leaned against the doorframe, looking at her in the golden afternoon light. Besides, I like building things. It is satisfying work. Well, you are very good at it. Beatrice turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. I will sleep well tonight knowing I have walls and a roof. Good. Isaac straightened, suddenly awkward. I should get going. The cattle need checking and Mrs. Henderson will have dinner waiting. Of course. Beatrice followed him outside, watching as he gathered his tools and loaded them back into the wagon. Isaac, thank you for everything. I do not think I will ever be able to repay this debt. There is no debt, he said firmly. He climbed up onto the wagon seat and looked down at her, this brave, beautiful woman who was trying so hard to survive on her own. But if you change your mind about the work, the offer stands. Always. I will remember that. Beatrice stood in front of her new cabin, her hand raised in farewell as he drove away. And as she watched him go, she felt something shift inside her, something that felt like the beginning of a change she had not anticipated. The days that followed fell into a pattern that surprised Beatrice with its sweetness. Isaac came by every few days, always with some excuse, bringing vegetables from his garden or checking to see if the roof was holding up or asking if she needed help with some task around the claim. Beatrice knew he was inventing reasons to see her, and she found she did not mind at all. In fact, She started looking forward to his visits, started finding herself watching the ridge for the sight of his wagon or listening for the sound of his horse. They would work together on various projects, Isaac helping her clear brush or repair fences while they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his family, about his father who had died in a riding accident 3 years before, and his mother who had followed him 6 months later from a broken heart. He spoke of his dreams to build the ranch into something substantial, to run cattle across 1,000 acres and make a name for himself in these hills. Beatrice shared her own stories, about growing up following her father from claim to claim, about the mother she barely remembered who had died when she was 5, about the books she loved to read and the places she dreamed of seeing someday. They discovered they both loved poetry, that they both thought the mountains were most beautiful just after dawn, that they both believed in working hard and being honest and treating people fairly. It was during one of these visits, about 3 weeks after Isaac had first brought the barrel, that things between them shifted into something neither could deny. They were sitting on the porch of Beatrice's cabin, sharing coffee that Isaac had brought, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "I like coming here," Isaac said quietly. "I like spending time with you." Beatrice's heart stuttered in her chest. "I like when you visit. It can get lonely out here by myself. You should not be by yourself." Isaac set down his coffee cup and turned to face her. "Beatrice, I know we have not known each other long, but I feel something when I am with you, something I have never felt before." "I feel it too," Beatrice admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It frightens me a little." "Why?" Isaac reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, and Beatrice felt electricity shoot up her arm at the contact. "Because I am alone in the world and I have nothing to offer you. No dowry, no family connections, nothing but myself and a played-out mining claim." She looked down at their joined hands. "You could have any woman in the county, Isaac. Why would you want someone like me?" "Because you are brave and strong and beautiful," Isaac said, his voice intense. "Because you stand barefoot in the mud catching rain in your boots rather than give up. Because when you smile at me, it feels like the sun coming out after a storm." He squeezed her hand gently. "I do not care about dowries or family connections. I care about you." Beatrice looked up and met his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the warmth that made her chest feel tight. "I care about you too," she said. "So much it scares me. Do not be scared." Isaac raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "I would never hurt you, Beatrice. I swear it on everything I hold dear. I believe you." And she did, with a certainty that went bone deep. This man who had brought her a barrel and built her a roof had also given her something far more precious, the feeling that she was not alone anymore, that someone cared whether she lived or died, whether she was happy or sad. Isaac leaned in slowly, telegraphing his intention, and Beatrice met him halfway. Their lips touched softly, tentatively, a question and an answer all at once. It was sweet and gentle and full of promise, and when they pulled apart, they were both smiling. "I have wanted to do that since the day I saw you standing in the rain," Isaac confessed. "I have wanted you to do it since you brought me cornbread and bacon," Beatrice replied, and they both laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet evening. They sat together as the stars came out, hands clasped, talking about the future in careful, hopeful terms. Isaac asked if he could court her properly, and Beatrice said yes with a full heart. They agreed to take things slowly, to give themselves time to build something real and lasting, but both of them knew they had already started falling, that the connection between them was something rare and worth nurturing. When Isaac finally rode home that night, Beatrice stood on her porch and watched until he disappeared into the darkness. She touched her lips, remembering the kiss, and felt joy bubble up inside her like a spring. The barrel he had brought her was full of water from the last rain, and the roof over her head was solid and true. But the greatest gift Isaac Abrams had given her was the knowledge that she was worth caring for, worth building for, worth loving. The courtship that followed was proper by the standards of the day, but it was also full of a sweetness that made Beatrice feel like she was living in a dream. Isaac came to call 3 times a week, always bringing some small gift: wildflowers picked from the meadow, fresh bread from Mrs. Henderson's kitchen, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. They would sit on her porch and talk for hours, learning the details of each other's lives and hearts. He took her into Jamestown on Saturday afternoons, driving her in his wagon with a careful propriety that made the town gossips approve. They would visit the general store where Isaac insisted on buying her necessary supplies, then have dinner at the hotel restaurant, the only nice place to eat in town. Beatrice was aware of the looks they got, the speculation in people's eyes, but she held her head high and took Isaac's offered arm with pride. "People are talking about us," she said one afternoon as they walked down Main Street. "Let them talk." Isaac covered her hand with his where it rested in the crook of his elbow. "I do not care what anyone thinks as long as you are happy." "I am happy," Beatrice said, and meant it with her whole heart. "Happier than I have been in a very long time, Mrs. Henderson," Isaac's housekeeper, approved of Beatrice from the moment they met. She was a stout woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a kind heart, and she saw immediately what was between Isaac and the young woman he brought to Sunday dinner. "About time that boy found someone," she told Beatrice while they were washing dishes together in the ranch house kitchen. "He has been alone too long since his parents passed. Needs someone to build a life with." "We are taking things slowly," Beatrice said, scrubbing a plate with perhaps more vigor than necessary. "Slowly is good, but not too slowly." Mrs. Henderson gave her a knowing look. "Life is short out here, girl. When you find something good, you hold on to it with both hands." Beatrice thought about that advice as the weeks turned into months. It was early October now, and the air had the crisp edge of approaching autumn. The leaves on the aspens up in the high country would be turning gold, and soon the first snows would dust the peaks. She and Isaac had been courting for 2 months, and every day she fell more deeply in love with him. He was everything she had not known she wanted: steady and reliable, but also funny and tender. He made her laugh with his stories about stubborn cattle and mischievous horses. He listened when she talked about her dreams and fears. He held her hand like it was something precious, and he kissed her with a reverence that made her feel cherished. It was in mid-October that Isaac took her on a picnic up into the hills above his ranch. They rode his wagon to a meadow he knew, a secret place where a creek ran clear and cold over smooth stones, and the grass was still green despite the season. He spread a blanket in the shade of a big oak tree and unpacked the basket Mrs. Henderson had prepared: fried chicken and potato salad, fresh rolls and apple pie, and a jar of cold lemonade. They ate and talked and laughed, and then they lay back on the blanket and looked up at the sky through the golden leaves. Isaac reached over and took Beatrice's hand, lacing their fingers together. "I love you," he said simply. "I have been wanting to tell you for weeks, but I was waiting for the right moment. I think this is it." Beatrice turned her head to look at him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since you brought me that barrel and told me nobody should have to collect rain in their boots." Isaac rolled onto his side, propping himself up on one elbow so he could look down at her. "Marry me, Beatrice. I know we have not been courting long by some standards, but I know my own heart. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build something together, a real home, a real family. Say yes." Beatrice reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Isaac's face broke into a grin so wide and joyful that Beatrice laughed out loud. He bent down and kissed her, not the gentle kisses of their courtship, but something deeper, more passionate, full of promise and desire. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "I want to do this right," Isaac said. "I want to give you a proper wedding, invite the whole town, make it something you will remember all your life." "I do not need all that," Beatrice protested. "I just need you." "But you deserve it." Isaac sat up, pulling her with him. "You deserve to have a beautiful day, to wear a pretty dress, to feel like the most important person in the world. Let me give you that, please." Beatrice saw how much it meant to him and nodded. "All right, a proper wedding it is." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, deciding on a date in late November after the fall work was done, but before the winter weather set in too hard. They would marry in the little church in Jamestown, and Mrs. Henderson would help with the preparations. Beatrice would move into the ranch house, into the big bedroom on the second floor that had belonged to Isaac's parents, and together they would start their life as husband and wife. As they drove back down the mountain in the golden afternoon light, Beatrice felt like she was glowing from the inside out. She was engaged to be married to a good, kind man who loved her. She would have a home and security and someone to build a future with. It was more than she had dared hope for on that rainy day when she had stood barefoot in the mud with nothing but her boots to catch the water. The next weeks were a flurry of activity. Mrs. Henderson took Beatrice under her wing, teaching her the routines of the ranch house and helping her prepare for the wedding. They went into Jamestown together and bought fabric for a wedding dress, a beautiful cream-colored silk that cost more than Beatrice wanted Isaac to spend, but that he insisted on buying anyway. "Only the best for my bride," he said firmly, and Beatrice had learned not to argue when he got that particular stubborn set to his jaw. The town rallied around the upcoming wedding with an enthusiasm that surprised Beatrice. She had always been an outsider, the daughter of an itinerant miner, but Isaac was well liked and respected, and people seemed genuinely happy for them. The ladies of the church organized a quilting bee to make them a wedding quilt, and the men at the general store offered to provide the music for the reception. Beatrice spent her evenings at the cabin sewing her dress by lamplight, every stitch a meditation on how much her life had changed. Sometimes Isaac would ride over after finishing his work and sit with her, watching her nimble fingers move the needle through the silk, asking questions about what she was doing just to hear her voice. "I cannot wait to see you in that dress," he said one evening. "I bet you will be the most beautiful bride California has ever seen." "You are biased," Beatrice teased, but she felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment. "Maybe," Isaac agreed, "but that does not make it less true." He reached over and stilled her hands, making her look at him. "I am the luckiest man alive, Beatrice. I hope you know that." "I am pretty lucky myself," she replied softly. "You saved me, Isaac, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," he corrected. "You gave me something to care about again, something to work toward. After my parents died, I was just going through the motions. But then I saw you standing in the rain, and everything changed." They sat in comfortable silence after that, Beatrice returning to her sewing while Isaac watched the lamplight play across her face. These quiet moments were some of his favorites, the domesticity of it all, the promise of many more evenings just like this one stretching out before them. The week before the wedding, a cold snap moved through the mountains, bringing with it the first real hint of winter. Beatrice woke one morning to find frost coating the ground and her breath misting in the air. She was staying at the cabin until the wedding, propriety demanding they live separately until they were married. But she would be glad to move into the ranch house where the big fireplace could warm multiple rooms. Isaac arrived that afternoon with news. "I want to move you to the ranch house today," he said without preamble. "It is too cold for you to be staying out here alone anymore." "Isaac, we have only a few more days," Beatrice protested. "People will talk if I move in before the wedding." "I do not care about talk. I care about you freezing to death in this cabin." Isaac was already gathering her things, packing them into the crates he had brought. "Mrs. Henderson agrees with me. She has the spare room all ready for you, and it is proper enough with her there as chaperone." Beatrice wanted to argue, but the truth was she had been cold the last few nights, huddling under every blanket she owned and still shivering. "All right," she conceded, "but I want it known that I am staying in the spare room until we are properly married." "Noted and agreed." Isaac grinned at her. "Come on, let us get you moved before the sun goes down." They loaded everything into the wagon, Beatrice taking a last look around the little cabin that had sheltered her. It was strange to think she would not be sleeping here anymore, that this chapter of her life was closing. But she was ready for the next chapter, more than ready to start her life with Isaac. The ranch house was warm and welcoming, a solid 2-story structure built of good lumber with glass windows and proper floors. Mrs. Henderson greeted them at the door, ushering Beatrice inside and showing her to the spare room on the first floor, a cozy space with a comfortable bed and a rag rug on the floor. "You will be snug as a bug in here," Mrs. Henderson declared. "And in a few days, you will be upstairs in the big bedroom where you belong." That night, Beatrice lay in the comfortable bed listening to the sounds of the house settling around her. She could hear Mrs. Henderson snoring softly in the next room and somewhere above her. Isaac was in his own bed, probably thinking about her the way she was thinking about him. It felt right to be here, to be under the same roof even if they were not yet sharing a room. It felt like coming home. The day of the wedding dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to promise good things. Beatrice woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. Mrs. Henderson brought her breakfast in bed, a rare luxury, and then helped her bathe and dress. The silk dress fit perfectly, the cream color making Beatrice's skin glow. Mrs. Henderson had lent her a delicate lace veil that had belonged to Isaac's mother, and when Beatrice looked at herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the elegant woman staring back at her. "You are a vision, Mrs. Henderson said, her eyes damp with emotion. "Isaac is going to fall over when he sees you." They arrived at the church to find it already filled with people. It seemed like half of Jamestown had turned out for the wedding, and Beatrice felt a swell of gratitude for this community that had accepted her. She stood in the small anteroom, listening to the murmur of voices beyond the door, and felt her heart race with anticipation. Then the door opened, and she walked down the aisle to where Isaac waited at the altar. He was dressed in a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, his eyes locked on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She had never seen him look more handsome or more serious, and when she reached his side and he took her hand, she felt the rightness of this moment settle into her bones. The preacher began the ceremony, his words rolling over them like a benediction. Beatrice heard herself make her vows, promising to love and honor Isaac for all her days, and heard his voice strong and clear as he made the same promises to her. Then he was sliding a simple gold band onto her finger, and she was doing the same for him, and the preacher was pronouncing them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," the preacher said with a smile, and Isaac did not need to be told twice. He cupped Beatrice's face in his hands and kissed her deeply, thoroughly, in a way that made several of the ladies in the congregation fan themselves. When they pulled apart, they were both grinning like fools, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was held in the church hall, where tables groaned under the weight of food that people had contributed. There was dancing and laughter, and Beatrice felt like she floated through it all on a cloud of happiness. Isaac kept her close, his hand always at her waist or holding hers, his eyes constantly seeking her out in the crowd. "Happy," he murmured during one of the dances. "Deliriously," Beatrice replied. "This is the best day of my life." "Mine too." Isaac spun her in a circle, making her laugh. "And it is only going to get better from here." They left the reception as the sun was setting, driving back to the ranch in the wagon with tin cans tied to the back and well wishes ringing in their ears. Mrs. Henderson had discreetly moved to stay with her sister in town for a few days, giving them privacy, and when they arrived at the house, Isaac insisted on carrying Beatrice over the threshold. "I know it is silly," he said, holding her in his arms, "but it is tradition." "I like traditions," Beatrice said, looping her arms around his neck. She felt breathless with anticipation, nervous and excited about the wedding night to come. Isaac carried her up the stairs to the big bedroom, setting her down gently just inside the door. The room was warm from the fire he had built earlier, and lamplight cast everything in a soft glow. He turned to face her, suddenly looking as nervous as she felt. "Beatrice, I want you to know that we do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said seriously. "We can take our time." "I am ready," Beatrice said, stepping closer to him. "I love you, Isaac. I want to be your wife in every way." That was all the encouragement he needed. Isaac kissed her again, and this time there was no church full of people watching, no need to restrain the passion that had been building between them for months. They came together in a tangle of eager hands and whispered endearments, learning each other's bodies with a reverence that made the experience beautiful despite their inexperience. Later, lying tangled in the sheets with Isaac's arms around her, Beatrice felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was what she had been searching for without knowing it, this sense of belonging, of being cherished, of having found her place in the world. "I love you," Isaac whispered against her hair. "My brave, beautiful wife." "I love you too," Beatrice replied, turning in his arms to kiss him. "My kind, generous husband." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, and Beatrice's last thought before drifting off was that she would never have to collect rain in her boots again, because Isaac had given her so much more than a barrel and a roof. He had given her a life, a future, and a love that would last until the end of their days. The first months of marriage were an adjustment for both of them, learning to share space and make decisions together, but it was also full of joy. Beatrice thrived in her new role as Isaac's wife, managing the household and working alongside Mrs. Henderson to keep everything running smoothly. She discovered she had a talent for the ranch accounts, her neat handwriting and careful calculations making sense of the ledgers in a way that impressed Isaac. "You are better at this than I ever was," he admitted one evening, looking over her shoulder at the books. "Maybe you should take over the finances entirely." "I would like that," Beatrice said. "I like numbers. They make sense in a way that most things do not." So Beatrice became not just Isaac's wife but his partner in running the ranch. She learned about cattle prices and hay yields, about when to buy and when to sell, about managing the seasonal help that came through during roundup and branding. Isaac valued her opinions and consulted her on major decisions, treating her as an equal in a way that some of the other ranch wives found scandalous, but that Beatrice treasured. Winter settled over the Sierra Nevada foothills, bringing snow and cold winds that rattled the windows. Beatrice loved these cozy months when she and Isaac would spend long evenings by the fire, reading or talking or simply being together. They made plans for the spring, talking about expanding the herd and maybe building a new barn, dreaming about the future they were building together. It was in February that Beatrice realized she was pregnant. She had missed her monthly courses twice and had been feeling queasy in the mornings, and when she finally admitted her suspicions to Mrs. Henderson, the older woman's face lit up with delight. "A baby," Mrs. Henderson breathed. "Oh, that is wonderful news. Have you told Isaac yet?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure." Beatrice pressed her hand to her still flat stomach, marveling at the idea that a new life was growing inside her. "How do I tell him?" "Just tell him straight out. That boy is going to be over the moon, Mrs. Henderson patted her hand. "And I am going to spoil that baby rotten. Just you wait and see." Beatrice waited until that evening when she and Isaac were alone in their bedroom. He was undressing for bed, and she was sitting at the vanity brushing her hair, watching him in the mirror. She felt nervous suddenly, worried about how he would react even though she knew he would be happy. "Isaac, I have something to tell you," she began. He looked up, catching the serious tone in her voice. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. Everything is right, actually." Beatrice turned to face him. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Isaac just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, transforming it into something radiant. "A baby, truly, truly." Beatrice found herself smiling back, his joy infectious. "Probably due sometime in late summer or early fall." Isaac crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "This is the best news you could have given me. A baby, our baby." He pulled back to look at her face. "Are you happy about it?" "I am thrilled," Beatrice said honestly. "A little scared too, but mostly thrilled." "I will take care of you," Isaac promised. "Both of you, you will want for nothing, I swear it." He kept that promise over the months that followed. As Beatrice's belly swelled with the growing child, Isaac became almost comically protective, insisting she not lift anything heavy or work too hard. Beatrice found it endearing even when it was exasperating, especially when he tried to stop her from riding her horse. "Isaac, I am pregnant, not made of porcelain," she protested. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not going to break." "I know, but I cannot help worrying." He ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "You are the most important thing in my world, Beatrice. You and this baby. I could not bear it if something happened to you." Beatrice softened at the genuine fear in his eyes. "Nothing is going to happen to me. I am strong and healthy, and Mrs. Henderson knows everything there is to know about birthing babies. I promise you, we will be fine." As summer approached and Beatrice grew larger, she found herself spending more time planning for the baby's arrival. Mrs. Henderson helped her sew tiny gowns and blankets, and Isaac built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, carving it with intricate designs of animals and flowers. They prepared the small room next to their bedroom as a nursery, painting it a cheerful yellow and adding a rocking chair where Beatrice could nurse. The baby arrived on a hot August day in 1879, after a labor that lasted through the night and into the morning. Isaac paced the floor downstairs while Mrs. Henderson and the midwife attended Beatrice, his heart in his throat every time he heard a cry of pain from above. When he finally heard the wail of a newborn, he nearly fell over with relief. Mrs. Henderson appeared at the top of the stairs, beaming. "You have a son, Isaac. A big, healthy boy. And Beatrice is doing fine." Isaac took the stairs 2 at a time, bursting into the bedroom to find Beatrice propped up against the pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up when he entered, and the smile she gave him was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Isaac approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face peering out of the blankets. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in the air, already protesting the indignity of being born. Isaac felt his throat tighten with emotion. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Just perfect. We need to name him," Beatrice said. "I was thinking maybe after your father." Isaac's father had been named William, and the thought of passing that name to his son felt right. "William Abrams, Will for short, I like that. William it is, then." Beatrice shifted the baby so Isaac could see him better. "Hold him. He should know his father." With trembling hands, Isaac took his son, cradling the tiny body against his chest. Will opened his eyes, dark blue and unfocused, and seemed to look right at his father. In that moment, Isaac felt something shift in his heart, an expansion of love he had not known was possible. He had loved Beatrice from the moment he saw her standing in the rain, but this was different, this fierce protectiveness and overwhelming tenderness for this tiny person who depended on them completely. "Hello, Will," he said softly. "Welcome to the world. Your mother and I have been waiting for you." The weeks after Will's birth were exhausting but joyful. Beatrice threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning to nurse and change and soothe the fussy baby. Isaac helped when he could, walking the floor with Will when he would not settle, changing diapers with fumbling hands that gradually grew more confident. Mrs. Henderson declared Will the finest baby she had ever seen and spoiled him shamelessly, knitting him tiny sweaters and singing him old Irish lullabies. The ranch hands would peek into the house when they came by for their pay, hoping for a glimpse of the boss's new son, and even hard-bitten cowboys would go soft-eyed at the sight of the baby. As Will grew from a newborn into a chubby, happy infant, the ranch prospered. The cattle brought good prices that fall, and Isaac was able to buy more land, expanding their holdings. Beatrice managed the accounts with her usual efficiency, and together they made decisions about the future of the ranch and their growing family. It was when Will was 6 months old, sitting up on his own and starting to show signs of his father's stubborn personality, that Beatrice realized she was pregnant again. She was surprised at how quickly it had happened, but when she told Isaac, he just laughed and pulled her into his arms. "I guess we are going to have a full house," he said. "I love it. I always wanted a big family." "Me too," Beatrice admitted. "Growing up as an only child was lonely sometimes. I want our children to have siblings to play with." Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret after Beatrice's mother, was born in the summer of 1880. She was smaller than Will had been, with wisps of blonde hair and her mother's brown eyes. Beatrice fell in love with her instantly, and so did Will, who would pat his baby sister gently and say "baby" with great pride. Life on the ranch fell into a rhythm that Beatrice found deeply satisfying. Her days were full of children and household tasks, of working on the accounts and helping Isaac with decisions about the ranch. She was tired most of the time, running after a toddler and caring for an infant, but she was also happier than she had ever dreamed possible. Isaac was a devoted father, spending time with his children even after long days working on the ranch. He would carry Will on his shoulders when he went to check on the cattle, pointing out different animals and teaching him their names. He would rock Margaret to sleep at night, singing off key lullabies that made Beatrice smile. "You are a good father," she told him one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, the children finally asleep inside. "I try to be." Isaac pulled her closer against his side. "They deserve the best we can give them." "They have that," Beatrice assured him. They have two parents who love them and each other. That is more than a lot of children can say. The years passed in a blur of activity and growth. Will grew into a sturdy boy who was all curiosity and energy, always getting into mischief and asking endless questions. Margaret was quieter, more thoughtful, with a gentle nature that reminded Isaac of Beatrice. Two more children followed, another son named Thomas and then a daughter named Eleanor, and the ranch house rang with the sounds of children's laughter and occasional squabbles. Through it all, Beatrice and Isaac's love for each other only deepened. They had their disagreements, as any married couple did, but they had learned to talk through their problems, to compromise and support each other. Isaac still looked at Beatrice with the same wonder he had felt that first day watching her collect rain in her boots, and Beatrice still felt her heart skip when Isaac smiled at her. The old cabin where Beatrice had lived alone was eventually torn down. The lumber used to build a new bunkhouse for the ranch hands. But they kept the barrel that Isaac had brought her all those years ago, positioning it at the corner of the house, where it caught rainwater for Beatrice's garden. Every time she saw it, she remembered that day when a kind cowboy had seen a woman in need and decided to help, and how that simple act of generosity had changed both their lives forever. One evening when they had been married for almost 10 years, Isaac and Beatrice sat on their porch watching their 4 children play in the yard. Will was 12 now, already showing signs of the man he would become, helping his father with the cattle and taking on more responsibility around the ranch. Margaret at 10 was a help to her mother, good with the younger children and already skilled at sewing and cooking. Thomas was 8 and Eleanor 6, both full of energy and mischief. "You remember the day we met?" Isaac asked, his hand finding Beatrice's as naturally as breathing. "How could I forget?" Beatrice leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was standing in the mud with my boots off, feeling like I had reached the end of my rope, and then there you were." "I had never seen anything sadder or braver," Isaac said. "This woman trying so hard to survive with nothing but determination and a pair of boots. I knew I had to help." "You did more than help. You gave me a life, Isaac, a family, a home, a future. Everything I have is because of you." Beatrice turned to look at him. "I love you so much it still sometimes takes my breath away. The feeling is entirely mutual." Isaac kissed her temple. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Abrams. You and these children we made together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors, listening to their children's happy shouts. The barrel still stood by the corner of the house, a reminder of where they had started, but they had built so much more than that simple structure. They had built a life full of love and laughter, of hard work and shared dreams, of moments like this one that made all the struggles worthwhile. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Isaac called the children in for supper, and the family gathered around the big table in the kitchen. Beatrice looked around at the faces she loved most in the world and felt gratitude so deep, it was almost painful. She thought about the woman she had been, alone and desperate, collecting rain in her boots because she had no other choice. And she thought about the woman she was now, surrounded by family in a home filled with warmth and security. The cowboy had brought her a barrel and a roof, but he had also brought her hope and love and a reason to keep fighting. And in return, she had given him her heart, her loyalty, and a family to fill the empty spaces in his life. It was a fair trade, she thought, the best trade 2 people could ever make. By the time their children were grown, the ranch had become one of the most prosperous in the region. Will stayed on to help run it, bringing home a sweet-tempered wife and starting the next generation of Abrams to work the land. Margaret married a banker from Sacramento and moved to the city, but she came home often with her own growing family. Thomas became a veterinarian, his gentle way with animals making him much sought after, and Alina surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, opening a school in Jamestown that served the children of miners and ranchers alike. Isaac and Beatrice grew old together, their hair turning gray and their bodies slowing down, but their love never diminished. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, hands clasped, watching the sunset and counting their blessings. They had grandchildren now, a whole passel of them, and the house was often full of young voices and the patter of small feet. "We did all right, did not we?" Isaac said one evening when they were both in their 60s. "Better than all right," Beatrice replied. "We built something real and lasting, not just this ranch but this family, these connections that will go on long after we are gone." "I never thought I would be this happy," Isaac confessed. "After my parents died, I was just existing, going through the motions. And then I saw you standing in the rain and everything changed, for both of us." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "You saved my life that day, Isaac, in every way that matters, and you saved mine." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it, the gesture as tender now as it had been on their wedding day. "We saved each other." They sat together as the stars came out, two people who had found each other at just the right moment when both of them needed saving. The barrel Isaac had brought all those years ago was still there, weathered now but solid, still catching rain for the garden. It was a symbol of everything they had built together, of the kindness that had sparked a love that lasted a lifetime. When Isaac died peacefully in his sleep at 72, Beatrice mourned him deeply, but without regret. They had had 44 years together, years full of love and laughter, of challenges overcome and dreams realized. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and when she finally joined Isaac in the cemetery on the hill above the ranch, she went with a smile on her face and peace in her heart. The ranch passed to Will and his family, but they kept the old barrel, positioning it proudly near the front porch of the house. And when grandchildren asked about it, as they invariably did, someone would tell them the story of how their grandfather had brought that barrel to a young woman who had nothing but her boots to catch rain in, and how that simple act of kindness had grown into a love story that lasted a lifetime. The land still produced good cattle, the house still rang with the sounds of family, and somewhere in the hills above Jamestown, two souls rested side by side, their love story complete. It had started with rain and boots and a barrel, with a cowboy who saw someone in need and could not look away, with a woman brave enough to accept help when it was offered. And it had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of kindness, of love, of two people who chose each other and never looked back. The oak barrel remained long after Beatrice and Isaac were gone, a fixture of the Abrams ranch that became part of family lore. Great-grandchildren would run past it on their way to play, and sometimes they would stop and look at it curiously, wondering why this old barrel was treated with such reverence. And then someone would sit them down and tell them the story, and they would understand that it represented something more than just a container for water. It represented the moment when two lives intersected and changed forever, when loneliness met compassion, and something miraculous was born. The story of Beatrice Crawford and Isaac Abrams became legend in Jamestown, passed down through generations, as an example of what real love looked like. Not the easy love of fairy tales, but the hard-won love of two people who fought for their happiness, who built something from nothing, who chose each other every day for the rest of their lives. And on rainy days, when water filled the old barrel and overflowed onto the ground, Someone would always pause and remember the woman who once collected rain in her boots, and the cowboy who brought her a barrel and a roof, and in doing so, gave her the world. The end.